Thank you for coming. I want to share with you, some common misconceptions, and these misconceptions can have rather substantial consequences. It isn't a matter of life or death. Actually, it is a matter of life or death. It's a matter of living and dying. If we are able in the next few minutes to clarify some of these misconceptions, to unravel them a little bit, the result will be, I think, a substantial improvement in the quality of living. Unless, of course, you don't have these misconceptions, that you're already working in this environment. We begin with the notion of life and death. We hear that so often, life and death, life and death, life and death, that we might begin to think that life and death are opposites, that death is the opposite of life, life the opposite of death. And I assure you, absolutely, unequivocally, this simply isn't so. The opposite of death is birth. The opposite of birth is death. So life is the process from birth to death. That's living. Death has no process. Death is not the equivalent of life. Life does not admit an opposite. And so because we hear life and death so often, we think that death has the same force and integrity that life does, and so we empower to death something, as if it were real. Now, death is as real as before birth is real. But what is surely real is the process from birth to death, and that's called living. Now, we reinforce this in our tradition every year around the holy days. We read from Deuteronomy chapter 30. In Deuteronomy chapter 30, we learn, I place before you this day life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life and blessing so you might live. That's the nature of what we read in English from Deuteronomy chapter 30. And so we reinforce this notion as if God itself is telling us life and death are opposites. The difficulty is this: that's not the Hebrew. The Hebrew is Natati lifnechem et hachayim v'et hamavet. I place before you the life and the death, the blessing and the curse. The word the article the, is left out of the translation. How might we understand it? It might be like this, as if the Holy One is telling us, I place before you the process of living, I place before you the process of dying. One is a blessing, the other is a curse. Your choice. You can choose to be living, or you can choose to be dying. So, who would choose death and a curse? I mean, that would be silly. Clearly you would choose living and a blessing. And yet we keep talking about dying somehow as if dying were real. And if one lives one's life as if one is dying, then you are living a curse. This is what the Torah is teaching us. So let me examine with you multiple choice about this process of dying. If there is a point between birth and death at which dying begins, and you cease to be living but you are now dying, let me ask you when it begins. A, you can no longer play tennis, therefore you are dying. B, you have to give up your car, or in my case, my motorcycle, and that's when dying begins. You get a diagnosis. So the diagnosis begins the process of dying, or none of the above. Now, what happens when you give up tennis? What happens is, indeed, your living no longer involves actively playing tennis. It may be coaching tennis, mentoring tennis, appreciating tennis. It may be that the lack of tennis opens up all sorts of new opportunities for living that you hadn't experienced before. What happens when you give up a car? It means that you are now on the receiving end rather than on the giving end. And receiving is as much part of life as it is giving. So it may be in our early stages of life we are givers, in our later stages of life we become receivers, enabling givers to give to us, but this too is living. And the diagnosis? I've heard from people with rather severe diagnoses that what it gives to them is the permission to remove everything else that is toxic in their life because they've got enough toxicity going on at the moment. And I've heard people say that their life didn't begin until the diagnosis. So we have this extraordinary experience. If there is no dying, what happens is end of life approaches. As end of life approaches, well then living becomes ever more concentrated, and one can recognize the miraculous, the ecstatic with smaller and smaller stimuli, if one has practiced living all along. Now, I have in front of me a glass. This is not because I'm thirsty. This is a glass that one might recognize as half full. I hear this a lot. Well, when my glass is half full, I want to concentrate on what is there rather than what isn't there. This is all right for a glass, but this isn't what I look like at all. The Hebrew word for water is mayim. It's a rather unusual word. There are only 3 like it in all of the Hebrew lexicon. Mayim, shamayim, and chayim. Mayim means water, shamayim means sky, chayim means life. And what they have in common is they overflow boundaries. If I took this water and I poured it on the table, it would overflow the table because 2 dimensions can't contain it. So I need something that can hold water. If I wanted to scoop up sky, the glass wouldn't do it. I would have to something enclosed like a balloon because it would overflow 3 dimensions. And if I wanted to enclose life, I need something like this. Something that can carry the 3 dimensions through the process of time. Because actually I overflow time, and I need something that will contain not only space but time as well. Now what happens as I process life? The shape of my glass begins to change. It isn't that my glass gets less full, it's that the shape of my glass changes. My glass no longer plays tennis, my glass does other things. It doesn't necessarily become smaller. The way in which I experience life can become larger. But the key to living, the process of living, is that your glass is always overflowing. It's what the 23rd Psalm says. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, not through the process of dying, but through the shadow of death, that is there, but I'm not going to let it overwhelm me. I'm going to keep on living. Then kosi revaya, my glass overflows. My glass overflows. So the goal of our life then is to live not half full, but like so, always overflowing, whatever the situation is. If our way of relating to the world is closed off in one respect, not to be resentful because our life is empty. Your life is not empty. The living process still goes on 100%, even though the arena in which one lives may change. So, a blessing then. The Holy One places before us the process of living, the process of dying. The Holy One places before us a blessing and a curse. Choose the process of living, because that's a blessing. You may, if you like, choose the process of dying and be resentful of all of the things that you used to be able to do that you can't do anymore. Choose that, and you're living a curse. But we are told it's entirely possible to live in such a way that kosi revaya, that my glass is always overflowing. Thank you for coming.